It's way too late at night. I felt like watching a Halloween movie. It's The Great Pumpkin. Charlie Brown is a Halloween classic, and I'd never actually seen it before. I know, it's a pop culture icon. If I actually did see it before, it was way too long for me to remember, so I checked it out for the first-ish time in a very long time. I grew up watching Peanuts. I found it charming and simple and engaging. Was never one of my favorites, but there was still something that hooked me into it. And that's pretty much the same here. I knew a lot of the Charlie Brown tropes just because I'd seen them, and they're definitely in here too. Charlie Brown and not kicking the football, and that people don't seem to like him. He's a loser and everything. You just feel so bad for him. I did know the trivia that he gets. I knew he gets the rock for trick or treating. He just says, "I got a rock." Everyone gets something else, like cookies or candies. And the audience felt so bad for Charlie Brown that they ended up sending gifts to the studio just so that he would get something. That's really, really sweet. It is a really nice, simple, harsh, awkward, engaging, simple special. Charlie Brown is something I compare a lot to Angela Anaconda, which obviously, if you know my channel, you'll know I have a touch of an obsession with. But between the two shows, there is a very similar tone. I was always consciously aware of that, but I see it even more now revisiting Charlie Brown. Both of these shows, very, very old school. You know, they definitely get a mid-20th century vibe from both, but not in a dated way, still in this very timeless way. You get very much kids talking like adults. Both of them have very smart lines, things that you wouldn't expect or even think of kids saying. But I like that. I think there's a fun to it. Because kids are smarter than we give them credit for, and I personally like the precocious kid. I like kids talking like adults because there's just a fun to it. And you see that here. There's a wit. I like the wit in both of these. In both cases, it's never unrealistic. It's still very much a precociousness, but both of them also have a bit of an awkwardness, too. Angela Anaconda more so with its animation, whereas Charlie Brown, it's a lot in the voice acting. And both, I really like. You could tell that the kids didn't really understand the lines that they were saying and the big fancy adult word-a-day calendar words that they're using, but it does add to it in its own strange way. And with Angela Anaconda, the animation's not the most fluid. A lot of people don't like it. I personally do, but it's so unique and so distinctive and so its own thing, and it is charming in its own very unique, really cool way. Both of them also are very, very laid back. They're both really laid back and mellow, but they're also really angsty and very harsh. And both of them have that contrast in a really similar way. I'm not just going to have an excuse to talk about Angela Anaconda, but there are similarities in tone and style. It's The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. It is fun to watch. It definitely captures that simplicity and fun and especially in the animation style. There's a small cast of characters. The animation's very simplistic, but at the same time, the colors are used really, really nicely here. I wouldn't even call it's not even a formal full story from beginning to end. It's definitely smaller, it's quirky, it's a series of moments and gags, but there is still, it's not all for nothing. You do get a story. Linus believes in this tradition. He's mixing up Christmas and Halloween, clearly before Nightmare Before Christmas, and many, many department stores conflating the two. But Linus believes in the Great Pumpkin. He waits for it every year. He misses trick-or-treating. And it's been running for 50 years. I don't think it's a major spoiler. Most people know it doesn't show up. But he still believes in it. He still misses Halloween. And he actually gets Sally, who's got a crush on him, to do this as well. And she, of course, resents it. She reacts pretty much like a kid would. It is really, really harsh. As a kid, I couldn't stand Lucy. Never liked her. I just wanted Charlie Brown to kick that goddamn football one more time. Or at least at the same time, just once. Just yell at her, or just... I'm not even saying advocating for violence in this case, but just something. That was always a frustration. But she does have a few more redeeming qualities in her. She is a bully. She's definitely unnecessarily cruel to Charlie Brown. But at the same time, she does have a good side to her. She still takes care of Linus. She asks for extra candy for him when she goes trick-or-treating. It's not implied that she's going to keep it for herself. She does give Linus candy, so that's good. And, you know, he's still in the pumpkin patch at 4 in the morning. She takes him in and puts him to bed. So she's a little more interesting that way. Definitely that old school style of she's gruff, but she'll do the right thing when it counts. That's something you do see a lot, especially in older works, in older media. A lot of sitcoms are like that. I'd say That 70s Show is a good example. Red Foreman, or I'd say A Christmas Story, very similar. This very harsh world, but also has heart of gold underneath. And done in that early to mid 20th century way. I do like the pumpkin patch. I'd say the strongest thing about this, I like the simplicity. I like the color work. It actually is interesting that the twist, it is just, hey, the Great Pumpkin doesn't show up. Linus is mixing this up. He is, you know, he's got his thing going, but he does miss out on Halloween, but he also doesn't. It's clearly a tradition, a thing only he believes in. That's interesting, because the Halloween tropey story that I do still see nowadays, but maybe played with a little bit more, is characters going to a Halloween event and someone tells them a scary story. There's 2 fake outs. One, the scary thing they see is someone playing a joke on them. Then the other fake out, oh, the thing was real after all. This one doesn't do that. It's just, nope, it's not real. Great Pumpkin didn't show up. It's just one person believing in this thing. And he's going to be doing this year after year and expecting the same thing to happen. It's kind of funny, but it's also kind of sad. It's amusing. It's very, very different. It's kind of funny, kind of cruel to just say, nope, this is not real. We're not doing that. We're not doing the fake out. Because sometimes the most obvious thing, the most obvious twist is the refreshing twist. That's very much here. You obviously get a lot of fun with Snoopy. There's not a major connection between the different plot points. Obviously, the overarching story is Linus and the Great Pumpkin and Charlie Brown just experiencing Halloween. Again, very, very low-key. It's very mellow. It's very... just a series of moments. I think that's why it has its appeal. It's very much... life isn't always a narrative. Sometimes just a bunch of stuff happens. And this nails it. Yeah, there is something where you can look at that and say, you know what, that's pretty cool. I see it does capture this, how the world can be just beautiful but also harsh, and it gets that feeling really well. Even if narratively it doesn't follow all the typical beats. In fact, it's different. Sometimes you want the story, but sometimes you just want to see a series of fun moments. You get a series of cute gags. It plays very much like an older movie where it's just scene to scene to scene, and it's got a small resolution. Simple, enduring, day-to-day life. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes things go your way, many times it doesn't. But you keep going. And say, who better to represent that than Charlie Brown? It's also, it is smarter than a lot of people realize. It is awkward. It's not perfect. It's not big. It's not dramatic. But it's realistic. And it's simple. And it's been there for a very long time. It's very, very nostalgic. And it's interesting. It's hard to really put into words. It's just, yeah, it's The Great Pumpkin.